Hi, welcome to another episode of What's Up, Irvine. I'm Curtis Drever, your host, and this podcast is about everything that makes Irvine such a great city. Its people, culture, influence, and opportunities. My hope is that by following us, you will learn something new and interesting about our city and feel more connected to our community. So today we have a special guest with us in the studio. It's Chris Ramsey of the USA Water Polo Association. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Curtis. Great to be here.
Before we jump into our core of our interview, I want to just read your bio, and I had to shorten it a lot. You have a very extensive background of like several pages, so I'll let our viewers go to your website and click on your name if they want more details. But I'm just going to read that, and then we'll jump into some of our questions. So Chris started in 2006, and he's responsible for carrying out the mission of the USA Water Polo worldwide, which includes overseeing all aspects of Olympic and national teams. Before joining USA Water Polo, Chris was one of three principal administrators for the New York City Ballet, and where he was responsible for the company's earned and philanthropic income and its endowment initiatives. Before joining New York City Ballet, Chris was a senior administrator for the MacNeil Lehrer Productions, which produced the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour on PBS, along with other special series for public and commercial television. Chris has published short fiction and poetry, authored a play, which was produced in Cambridge, England. He was co-producer of a documentary, which also aired on public television, executive producer of the New York City Ballet workout videos and other media projects for famous ballets. He's the editor of several books on ballet, including Tributes, celebrating 50 years of New York City Ballet. I saw that one myself. That's quite an amazing book you put together. A cum laude graduate of the University of Redlands in music and English, Chris played varsity NCAA water polo, attended Cambridge University through an exchange program, earned a Master of Fine Arts from Cornell University in creative writing, more recently earned his certification in Olympic sport leadership from the U.S. Olympic Committee and Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. And locally, you are a board member at the Barclay Theater right here in Irvine. So, I had to take a breath, right? So, wow, what an amazing history you have with your all that you've done in this. I
think I'm just old, Curtis.
You're just old. Okay. Well, we both have a lot of gray hair, so I didn't want to say that. So I'd like to just start in to let our viewers know more about you as a person, and then we'll get to things you do at your day-to-day job. So jumping straight into it, so can you, what is the best lesson that your mom or dad ever taught you?
They taught me to love and respect others, and they always told me that if I ever had a problem with someone, I should get to know them better.
Okay. Do you have a fond memory of a childhood that you would want to share?
Yeah, one of my dad's big projects, we were a lower middle class family, and they had come to California after World War II. He was a World War II veteran. He ended up as a lieutenant colonel in the Pentagon and stayed in the reserves. And they had come from very modest upbringing. My father was from Appalachia. His father was a coal miner / English teacher.
Oh, wow.
And my mother was from a part of West Texas where all there really is a zip code and some oil wells.
Okay.
And so when they came to California, it was post-war, and they had the American dream like everybody else. And one of my dad's big projects was to install a swimming pool in the backyard. And we were able to put, this is early 1960s, some speakers out there. And I remember being able to lie on a raft in the pool and listen to Bernstein conducting the New York Philharmonic in Rhapsody in Blue.
Okay.
Debussy's Prelude to Afternoon of a Faun. And I just thought to myself, what an incredible life this is, that you can lie on an air mattress in a pool in Southern California and listen to some of the most amazing pieces of music ever composed and performed. And it was just a really safe feeling, but it was a creative feeling.
Yeah. So floating in a pool, relaxing, listening to good music, classical music is just a fond memory. That's okay. That's great. Do you do you have a tipping point in your life that really changed your direction?
Yeah, I really did. And it was when I was working for MacNeil Lehrer, when I first came to them, it was called the MacNeil Lehrer Report.
That's what I
And it
remember.
was a PBS show that we called it Talking Heads, but it was really about getting people on and not doing just a soundbite, like we're doing today, like really talking with people and really digging down to deeper levels with them. And it was not a really popular commercial show, but it developed a following over time. And it existed mainly by sponsorship. And it had the public television stations that broadcast it paid about half the rent.
Okay.
And the other half was paid for the expansion to what was called the MacNeil NewsHour. It's now the PBS NewsHour, was a big grant from AT&T, like $12 million
Okay.
back in the day. And AT&T divested, changed its strategy, and left. And the program was on the verge of going under. And they, of course, had representatives in New York and in Washington, D.C., and in other places to raise a new sponsor and to raise those new funds. But after 2 years of notice to do that, they were unable to do it.
Okay.
And my boss at the time, who was the head of the production company and had been Jimmy Carter's media advisor for television when he got elected back in the 80s, said, if you have any ideas, we're going under. Can you
going
help
under?
us?
Can you help?
And, what I had confidence in was that I knew how to write.
Okay.
So I spent some time drafting a very careful letter and thinking about who could receive that letter and whom it might be relevant to. And I found a company called Archer Daniels Midland that's still in business, and they're
Okay.
one of the
They're
largest
big.
agricultural producers. And agriculture is one of the most highly government-regulated businesses in the world.
Yeah.
And I wrote them one-page letter. It was about 4 paragraphs. And I got a phone call a couple of weeks later saying, is this real? And I said, yes. And they came on board, and they underwrote all the funding that we had lost. And they stayed with the program for 10 years. They stayed longer than I did. And then later I was also able to bring in the New York Life Insurance Company as another supporter. So
Wow.
as opposed to being someone who was dealing with affiliate relations and promotions, basically, all of a sudden I had changed the hat that I was wearing to something that
Bringing in the money.
was a need.
Yeah,
And
sponsors.
that's something that's kind of followed me in the other roles that I've had, the ability to leverage capital to accomplish things.
So that's pretty amazing. So that is a huge pivot, I would say, right? Or pivotal. So the show's going under. They're like in desperation. Hey, Chris, by the way, could you help? Or you have any ideas? And you're like, oh, okay, sure. And boom, you changed it.
It was one of a few wins I've had in my life, and that was a pretty sweet win. I remember where I went to Archer Daniels Midland. They're in Decatur, Illinois, and it's just soybean fields, acres and hundreds of acres of soybean fields. And I had flown into St. Louis, and I went back to St. Louis Airport, and those days they had TCBYs, and I had a frozen yogurt.
Oh,
and called New York and said, hey, I have some good news.
That's the country's best yogurt, right? The TCBY, yeah. I remember those.
That was my celebration.
Yogurt, all right. All right. Well, that's a fantastic story and very, I know your other parts of your career that made a huge shift and you kept using that,
Well, I do think
encouragement.
one thing that I learned from it, Curtis, was there's a lot of really good work that people do in this world, and there's a lot of really great people doing that work. But how resources flow to them and flow to these projects is not uniform, and it's difficult to judge. So being able to help people, for example, at MacNeil Lehrer, This was a program that believed that a lot of the news media was more focused on trying to sell commercials than actually inform people.
Okay.
And that if we did not have an informed electorate, that our system of democracy wouldn't work. And I think when you look at what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years as media has evolved, they were right about that.
Yeah.
And that philosophy is more important today than it's ever been. At the ballet, I had these phenomenal dancers and musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, the company was over 100 dancers that were employed annually, more than 70 musicians, not to mention the stage hands, the costume designers. We had a costume shop of 15 people. They were all artists. They were all completely dedicated to an ideal of beauty.
Yeah.
And who is going to help them find those funds? Because we used to say every time the curtain goes up, you lose money. So you needed to fill that gap. And I used different techniques, but the idea was the same. If this is something that's worth caring about, it's worth getting the funds not only to do it, but also to do it well.
Yeah.
You know, I don't invest in mediocrity. I don't think anybody wants to. And this has also been true in water polo. It's a sport that creates water safety, influences kids all over the country and the world. It's an Olympic sport. And yet it's not monetized the way that the NBA or the NFL is. So how do you get, for example, funds for the young men and women who represent our country in these competitions so that they can prepare and train themselves?
Yeah.
And how do you also do it for all the kids who want to have an athletic experience coupled with their education? Because our system in America is different than everybody else.
Yeah.
We believe in sports as part of the educational experience. And frankly, I think that's part of the secret sauce in American ingenuity and business performance, is that kids learn teamwork, they learn discipline, they learn a lot of those lessons from sport, not from the classroom.
Very true.
But they're integrated. And so being able to leverage capital for these kinds of activities, it's something, frankly, I'm proud of, that I can do that.
Yeah.
And it has become a little bit of a special skill.
Sounds like it. Well, you've been very successful at it, and that's that's fantastic, because a lot of those disciplines that you mentioned, you're right, they're not necessarily good at getting funds or getting sponsorships, but they have the talent, and you're ones that brings that to them and helps support it and lets them flourish, right? So that's been huge.
You have to let, whether they're artists or athletes, and I really believe that a balanced life includes athletics and competition, and it involves the arts, whether it's reading, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's music, all these things are really important to having a full and balanced life. So I believe in it, and it's worked in my life and with my family. And I see it as a resident of Irvine.
Yeah.
These things matter to families.
So what has CEO taught you about life?
There are a lot of speed bumps. There's a lot of differing points of view. There are a lot of ideas. And part of it's wonderful because people care passionately, but because they care passionately, sometimes it's hard to see things objectively.
Okay, right.
So
passion.
I think a lot of the job that I have now, besides sort of being a spokesperson for the inherent value of the sport and what we do, is resource generation and allocation. So and deciding figuring out how we can get resources and then how to fairly allocate them. One of the first decisions I made when I came was we had a men's national team and a women's national team. You'll remember recently the U.S. soccer program had a lot of controversy about what they were paying the women's team versus what they were paying the men's team and the resources available. Well, I made a decision, and my board endorsed it right off the bat, that we were going to give both teams an equal chance to succeed, and we were going to divide the resources equally for our national team programs by gender, so that everybody had an equal shot. And that's one of those kinds of resource allocation questions that becomes really important.
Right. Yeah.
So that's part of it. The other part of it is, of course, people fight for resources.
So
you have to deal with the fact that they're passionate. They think that, they believe deeply in what they're doing, and they'll fight hard for those things. So trying to remember that sometimes when you're in the heat of the battle over it
Kind of tough.
is important. But I just always try to remember that people are trying to be successful and do good. And it's kind of sometimes my job to be a bit of an arbiter.
So what do you like most about your role there as CEO?
That it makes a difference in people's lives. Personally, since we're talking about Irvine
And you were a
and
water polo
family,
player too.
I played water polo, and I got some things from it that I really appreciate to this day that I'm still giving back for. And one of those, frankly, was a little bit of a swagger. I think water polo players have a lot of confidence in themselves, and it's a difficult sport to train for. A lot of people consider it the toughest sport in the world. And so being able to play it and play it at a reasonably high level really helps your sense of confidence. And I noticed, for example, during the teen years, a lot of our members at times when their confidence can take a hit, where they're trying to ask themselves questions about who they are and what they're going to do in their lives and what's meaningful to them, having that confidence is hugely important. Also, it's a team sport, so learning to work with others and having a base of high-achieving friends is really another important part, especially during those teen years when sometimes you can focus more on your flaws than your strengths.
Right.
And there have been a lot of really moving stories. There was a story the other day of a woman, a 12-year-old, who had tried to commit suicide.
12-year-old?
Yes.
Okay.
And she talked about how the sport helped her unravel that mess in her life and helped her get back to center and get back to doing something meaningful. So,
wow.
I know that we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of families around the country that play our sport and other sports. And to me, being able to help those families have access to something that can be a guiding light for them,
right,
that can help them be physically healthy, that can help them work as a team, build friendships, build meaningful relationships. I mean, hey, that's the stuff of a happy life. So that's more the way I think about the sport. I mean, yeah, we won some gold medals and that's been fun, but I feel like that's a symptom of getting the culture right.
Okay. By the way, just for our viewers, like how big is the organization in terms of players and like the breadth of it? Because a lot of people probably don't know that.
We have about 300 employees. About 50 of them are full-time.
Okay.
A lot of them are coaches all over the country. And we are, about $15 million in annual revenue. We're based here in Irvine.
Yes, I know. Irvine, yes.
Irvine.
Yes.
And we focus a fair amount of our resources on our Olympic teams, and particularly proud of our women's performance. They've won gold medals in the last 3 consecutive Olympics. If they win
that's pretty amazing.
In Paris that's coming up, they'll establish a new record in water polo. No team has ever won 4 consecutive gold medals. So
wow. That's an incredible team, obviously. Or
they're incredible.
Yeah.
And they're well educated, they're great role models. Part of selfishly as an Irvine resident, what I'm kind of excited about is having these athletes that have, attended universities like UCLA and Stanford and Princeton and others, and having them here in our community as mentors and role models to young people growing up and as resources to families. So I think in my experience, when you're around high-achieving people, it tends to bring up your level of achievement. And so my philosophy has always been, and I even went back to playing, I used to play tennis in Central Park on the courts, and we'd have to get up at 6 a.m. to be able to get a court. But yeah, I always wanted to play people that were better than me, not people I could beat, because that made me better.
Oh, yeah. And
I think having this level of a program operating out of Irvine is just a huge positive for our community.
I agree. I think it's been 10 years it's been in Irvine. So I just realized that recently too. And so I think that is a pleasant surprise for viewers. Say we have the headquarters right here in our own city for the last 10 years. And there's so much neat, happening with that organization too. You're sharing some of it. I had a quick question too before I ask you a difficult question, or maybe not difficult, but so I can't remember offhand. Do we have any Irvine players or from Irvine that are in the association?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I figured there's at least a couple. Is there any
Well, there are almost 1,000 families that are members of USA Water Polo.
Okay.
And then if we want to break it down, one...
Like any of them that had gone to Olympic level?
Yes. We had a woman speaking. Her name's Julie Swale-Ertel. She was on the first year that water polo was a female Olympic sport in 2000. She was on that team.
Okay, wow.
We have Ryan Bailey, who was a UCI player and was a silver medalist in the Olympic team from 2008, as was Jeff Powers, also a UCI player. And more recently, on our national team now, and he was on our Olympic team in Tokyo on the men's side, Hannes Dabe,
okay,
who I think played at Orange Lutheran, and also Tara Prentice, who is, I think, going to school at UCI right now as a candidate for the Paris Olympic team that we'll be selecting next year. So
wow, that's quite a few you just rattled off.
Significant
yes.
contributions.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we are able to build the new facility here at the Great Park that we have been working in partnership with the city to build, there will be more.
Be more. Yeah. So what is the most difficult part about your job?
Realizing you can't make everybody happy. I'm a little Pollyannish sometimes. I kind of believe that we all have been given incredible life, incredible resources, the ability to enjoy and to do good. And sometimes it isn't always happy. It isn't always possible to make everybody happy with the choices that you have to make. Because we're also a business, so we have to make business decisions. We're competing not just domestically, but we're competing against every nation in the world. And in Olympic sports, we are, when I'm talking about this, we, America, is really the only major country who does not provide government support for its Olympic programs.
Yes, I remember that. That's been that way forever, right?
It's been that way forever.
And people forget that other countries sponsor their athletes.
Yeah, I hired a coach from Serbia, and I said, "What was your budget?" And he said, "What budget? The government provides whatever we require." And I said, "Well, you have a budget here."
Guess what? Yeah, things are different here.
And I think the budgeting process and all of that, there's a good discipline and rigor that comes with that, so it's not all bad. What it's done for us, and this was also part of my experience at the ballet, is I don't think it's good to be too dependent on one source of revenue or one patron.
Yeah.
So it's caused us to diversify the revenue that comes into the organization so that we're not too dependent on just donors or just the government or just whatever.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different people that are contributing. And of course, you have to balance that because they all have ideas about how we would be most successful.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and these are the things that are complicated,
yes,
and sometimes difficult about it. And it's also difficult, frankly, seeing people pursue their dreams and reach a ceiling.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately for me, I realized I wasn't going to be a professional musician probably the time I was around 14 or 15. And I just looked at it and I thought, I'm not that talented. I'm never going to be that talented. And the ballet, sports, these are talent sports.
Yeah.
Talent
You got to be in the top
endeavors.
1%.
So at a certain point, you have to recognize how far you can go. And usually people have trouble realizing that themselves. They have to be told that. And I think that's another really difficult part of the business that we're in when you tell someone, maybe it's time to pivot. Maybe it's time to find another way to use your gifts and talented. You're really talented.
Yeah,
You're
maybe
really
water polo is not your thing there. So, yeah.
Maybe not as a player, but maybe as a coach. And we have some fabulous coaches that have not made the Olympic team, but they've tried so hard to do so that they've become amazing coaches. So there's always something for you. But again, that I call it resource allocation, but trying to figure out where everybody can best thrive.
Yep.
That's both one of the great things about the job, one of the biggest challenges, and sometimes some of the hardest medicine that we have to give to people.
I bet. How can our viewers help you
Well,
or the association?
look, aquatics are huge in Irvine. Right now, we're trying with the city to build a really massive new aquatics complex in the Great Park. And on Tuesday, there was a vote, and the $90 million was approved up for it for the city. My biggest concern about it is, well, two things. One, it needs to be a community facility.
Yes.
Where the community is the primary beneficiary. Our use is frankly very small. We have some programs that are available to Irvine residents that will come in, that will be part of that usage. But my biggest concern is that it's done well. This can be a jewel in the crown of the Great Park and of Irvine, to build an aquatic facility that, frankly, from climate change perspective, from usage perspective, can really be one of the greatest aquatic centers in the world. And it can be done within the budget that the council has authorized. We need to get going on it so it's done before the LA Olympics, and we will need some private support as well. So I just think Irvine standing up for Irvine doing things at a high level is part of what's made this city special. And I think we should hold the Great Park to that same standard. And I think our viewers can really help by contributing their input to the council and to our officials to let them know this is something that we want to see happen. I don't know if you know this, Curtis. Drowning is the #1 cause of accidental death among children 5 and under in Irvine.
In Irvine, no, I didn't know that.
And when Irvine offers a water safety or swim lesson class, it's subscribed to in 1.4 seconds. There, 1.4 seconds. There is a waiting list because for water safety because there's not enough facility to do that. So what we're hopeful of is that this facility it'll have everything up to the highest level of Olympics, but it's also going to emphasize water safety. It's going to emphasize programs for seniors. My wife has trouble moving around if she doesn't do aqua aerobics, ice swim laps. We need something that will serve the whole community.
Well, it sounds like I support, that would be a great facility to have. I would certainly support that. So thank you for sharing that. So a couple fun things there. I like to ask our guests is like, what's your go-to food? If we're going to go out to dinner, where is it? Or not where, but what is it? You have throw you a curveball there.
That is a great curveball, and I would say it. No, it's fine. The things that I love, and then the things that are good for me. So I have to be honest about that. But I do love an occasional apple fritter on the what's not good for you side, and I love chocolate. And on the positive side, I'm a big fan of a great Cobb salad.
That sounds good. That's a good balance there, a Cobb salad and a fritter.
a fritter like once a month, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks if I've done something that I feel like I get a special treat for. Cobb salad's more regular occasion.
There you go. So as kind of maybe a closeout question, what would you like our viewers to know about you as like a takeaway? Or it doesn't have to be it could be a fun fact or something. Just, when somebody's watching, they're just like, okay, that's what Chris is all about.
I think in our home, we have 2 grand pianos. We gave a third one away to a school because we didn't have enough space for it, and we thought it'd be better if it was used more.
Wow, okay.
And all 3 of my sons played water polo, but my oldest is an opera singer. My middle does fundraising, some ways like I do for Caltech. And my youngest is an entrepreneur. And all of us as a family have realized the value of combining different things, not being specialists in just one. So this principle that we talked about earlier of a healthy body and a strong athletic life, a strong artistic life, which feeds the soul, and a good work ethic. We were a family that really believes that you make your own luck. And one thing you might not know about us, you mentioned I serve on the board at the Barclay Theater as a volunteer. My wife has been a volunteer at Families Forward for more than 10 years, helping homeless there. She's the leader of the Cool Block Climate Program as well, and heads our Little Canyon's Edge Association where we live. We also believe you have to be a good neighbor. You have to reach out and give to be more in your own life. And so we found that in Irvine. We found people here want to give and want to make the place better.
Yes.
And we want to do that too. And we're constantly finding new ways to do it.
Great answer. Well, thanks for being my guest today, or our guest on What's Up Irvine. And thank you for joining us on another episode on What's Up Irvine. Again, if you like what you've seen there, would you just, whatever social media you're watching or listening to, would you like us or follow us? And also, if you have any other ideas for people we could talk to or topics, please send us an email to info@loveirvine.org, info@loveirvine.org. And thank you again for joining us.